Hey there, YouTube. SkepticalRoot. Today we're going to be continuing with part 2 of our reasonable questions for anti-SJWs, originally published by Christy Winters. A link will be down in the description for the entire video, just as we're going to be watching the video together and discussing each part as it comes up. So let's get right back into it.
In videos and in the comment sections, anti-feminists often take up the most extreme or the weakest feminist position they can find, or they just straight up misrepresent what the feminist position is. Instead, why not take up the strongest, most robust feminist argument you can find and really challenge yourself?
Simply because those are harder. It's more work. And I'm not going to speak necessarily for all anti-social justice warriors or anti-feminists or people who just aren't you. But frankly, the crazy ones are the ones that get the most views. They are the ones that the outliers who say, look at how crazy this person is. It just so happens that they happen to be doing it in the name of something that I disagree with. This is the type of people involved in your movement. I mean, it's not... I don't want to say that it's dishonest, but it does kind of fall into this fallacy that I have invented, the fallacy of the major minority, where a minority of people then represent the larger group. That's not the case. But somebody sitting down and saying we need... gender equality between the sexes, who argues with that? Most of the people who are going to sit here and be against feminism are going to agree that that's something we should have. Women should have the right to do whatever they want to. Men should have the right to do whatever they want to. And we should be equal. That's, relatively speaking, the egalitarian position, which I'll be talking more about later. But that is where we're coming from. Taking a robust position from imagine, and this is something that I well, using illustratively as opposed to calling Christy Winters a creationist or saying that her arguments are like creationists, but I'm going to liken the conversation between feminism and creationism here. When discussing creationism, which people do you talk about? Do you talk about the people who are kind of close but kind of harmless and for the most part you agree with what they're saying? Is that the position you're going to take up and say, well, this is fine except for this part? Or are you going to go after the people who say crazy things like, there's nothing wrong with the state, you know, our township or our county building a Methodist church in the town square? Nothing wrong. Most people in town are Methodists. That'll be fine. That's the position you attack. You don't attack the position where the Christians come out and say, well, you know what, secularism is actually not that bad, and, well, everyone should just kind of get along, and we'll do our stuff over here, and you do your stuff over there. Where's your video on that, Christy? For as much as you talk about what people should be doing, that's the video you've never made, where you talk about the simple positions, the simple differences between people. Where's your video saying that those people, religious people, shouldn't still be doing that because religion is irrational, because while they may have been indoctrinated into that position, there's no evidence for the existence of a god or a deity, and therefore they should stop doing that? That's what you're asking us to do to feminists, is to find that position, the strong positions, and challenge those. But again, not what you're doing. That's not what I'm going to do either, but because those aren't the things that I'm passionate enough to do a video on, if you will. So I think that you're even asking that is rather dishonest. But I guess that's it.
I am deeply concerned with male addiction rates, suicide rates, and abuse rates, because I have worked with these issues in the quote-unquote real world. Would you be willing as anti-feminists to put aside your differences with feminists for the greater good of addressing these issues, especially as the kind of solutions needed are not necessarily gendered? And if so, I would actually like you to let me know, because I'm not fucking around or presenting any gotchas here. I actually really think that we could get something done if we work together. So, yeah.
Yes and no, Christiosity. Sorry. Yes and no. I don't. How do I say this? I don't have the time, energy, effort to put in additional time to your particular causes. I would support you in your causes if you had a GoFundMe to donate money to a drug or alcohol addiction shelter or something like that. You've got as good of a chance of me donating to that as you do pretty much any other charity. Having said that, I would do a video on it for you too if you had a thing that you wanted to bring awareness to. I don't have this. I have a small channel. I'd be willing to do that for you, to help you out, to engage at least in that level for that cause. But boots on the ground stuff, I kind of got my plate kind of full right now for that. Not that it's not important, not that we don't need to bring awareness to that stuff. I just am unable to help at this time with that. But rock on, do something about that, and let me know if there's something I can do to help. You know, maybe we can work out some way that I can assist you with that endeavor.
What is third wave feminism? Because I've often heard you folks insist that you have no objection to feminism in general. It's specifically third wave feminism that you have a quarrel with. So what is third wave feminism specifically? And what specifically about third wave feminism do you have such a problem with?
Steve Shives is directly looking at Armored Skeptic because Armored Skeptic did a video about feminism and Steve Shives' brand of feminism, and in the first few minutes of it says, I don't have a problem necessarily with feminism, just third wave feminism. I'm sure that the Skeptic probably won't respond to this. He's got a lot of other stuff he's going on, and enough people are responding to this video in the first place. He might. But then again, Steve Shives has his own agendas here. Be that as it may, third wave feminism is building off of primarily the first and second wave of feminism, which brought things such as voting rights and what we'll broadly call legal equality to women in this country, and its goal is to bring that everywhere. That is the dividing line between what second and third wave feminism is. Third wave feminism wants to extend that the advocacy of women into the social realm, so that women feel as capable of doing anything that a man does in society, which is perfectly fine. Most people don't have a problem with women feeling empowered and going out and doing whatever they want to. But it is, in my estimation, it is nitpicky. We should be treating people equal, not treating people as special. Third wave feminism brings in concepts of, and this is more the social justice end, bringing in concepts of safe spaces and minority bodies and words and things like that, where people should be heard, but they should be heard because they have something to say, not because of their race or gender or anything like that. That's not the important part. The important part is their message. And if we treat people the same, then people will all become the same. When we treat people as special, the only thing we can do is introduce a different hierarchy. You can't necessarily raise everybody up by putting stones on the ships. You need to let the tide come in and raise the boats, independent of which boat it is. That's my objection, at least, to third wave feminism, is this rather long and tedious mooring system where smaller boats or less used boats are moved to the front when they're not necessarily want to be in the front or have the utility for being in the front, so that when the tide comes in, they are already higher. I mean, I'm not sure where that analogy falls apart at, but that's probably right there. So, yeah, that's your answer, Steve. Thanks.
Why is it that this feminist represents all feminists, but this men's rights activist doesn't represent all men's rights activists?
Whoa, wait, sexism all of a sudden? Ladies and men are different? So we're supposed to punch men and not hit ladies and open doors for men, but not ladies? Fuck you, get out of my face, you tiny piece of shit.
Okay, so I'm not exactly sure how to answer that, because is that woman in the video a feminist? I don't know exactly. Perhaps she is. She seemed to be behaving as one, as the social justice feminists tend to do, which is shouting down Milo Yiannopoulos in that case, I believe. I don't think that she represents all feminists. I don't have a problem with feminists. I'm just not a feminist. And I wouldn't say that, you know, hey, look, this is a person that represents all feminists. I would say that, hey, look, here's a feminist acting crazy. The guy, is he a men's rights advocate? I don't know. I don't know who he is. I've never seen this video before. It's some guy yelling at a McDonald's. And frankly, I haven't heard him say anything necessarily that's not, like, that's wrong, I mean, per se. He seems to be talking about, like, you know, if I kind of get the feeling here that you want people to be equal, then why don't we treat people equally? I don't have a context for the video or anything, so I don't really know what's going on. I would say that he represents MRAs or men's rights advocates or activists or whatever, however you labeled that. I'm sorry, I don't remember. As Trigglypuff, as she's called, represents, you know, feminists. I don't think either one of them necessarily does.
Why am I continually asked to answer for the views of feminists if I agree with feminism's overall aims, but don't agree much with those particular feminists? Does that mean that I can ask you to answer for anybody who labels themselves similarly to you, even if you don't agree much?
Well, when you identify with particular labels, you are saying, I am part of this group. When people within that group express certain views and aren't challenged by you, then people would question you and say, why do you feel this way? Because you have not disassociated yourself from that particular position. If someone comes up to you and says, why do you think this is okay? And you don't think it's okay, and you say, it's not, then nobody's going to ask you to answer for somebody else with that position. If you don't agree with it, then they're not going to expect you to support that other person. Just as, you know, I agree with both feminist and men's rights positions depending on the topic. I mean, that nobody's going to ask me to defend someone else's position. That's up to the other person to defend, not up to me. And it's not up to you. So don't defend it if you don't think that that's what you should be doing. Kind of seems, you know, rational to me.
If SJWs are bad because they spend too much time whining and don't talk about real problems, then why aren't you talking about those problems instead of just whining about the other people over and over and over for literally years? I mean, in the scale of priorities, that's like even lower, right? You know, you've got the real problems, you've got the things that feminists worry about, and then you've got you going, oh, how dare they? Just how dare they have different priorities from me? Why can't they do what I do? Whine about whining forever for a living. That's healthy.
I've tried to watch some of H Bomber Guy's videos, and that's about what he sounds like there too. We can all make videos complaining about how we prioritize things, because we all going to prioritize things how we feel are how they should be by priority of some kind. It's if you think that racism is more an important topic to tackle than, say, male suicide rates, okay. If I think that male suicide rates are something that's more important to tackle, I may ask you, why aren't you addressing those things? If you think racism is a more important thing to tackle, you would ask me, why aren't I addressing racism? And we can state our priorities, and we can come to discussions, and we can bring both topics to the fore. But asking those questions is not the same thing as complaining. When you advocate a particular position that seems counter to the other position, for example, if you advocate for women's shelters for abused women, and somebody says, hey, what about men's shelters, because there aren't any shelters for abused men, that's bringing up a legitimate point to the argument you're making. How about we deal with abused people and getting them out of their bad situations instead of just worrying about the women? That's the best I can come up with for a discussion on that. But that's really, I think what you're complaining about is nuance. That's not right. Maybe it is, though.
Why don't you seem as concerned with actual feminist theory in academia as you are with wrecking people for views?
Well, first off, because that gets more views, and that's funnier, and it's an entertainment medium. This is social media. This isn't academia. I have read some feminist material that I didn't think was very useful or worthwhile. And like most things that I don't think are useful or worthwhile, I put them aside. The Bible being a good example of that. When somebody comes up and says, kill all fags, then I talk about it. I don't need to go to the Bible necessarily every day and say, well, here's another point of the Bible that the Bible got wrong. Although there are channels dedicated to that, and some of them are very funny, mind you. That's what they're doing with it. That's not what I'm going to do with it. I'm having conversations here. I'm not lecturing. I'm not making comedy per se, as you can tell by how boring some of my videos are. But really, I mean, come on, dude. That's a question here. I'm not going to tackle feminist theory because I don't like it any more than I'm going to attack, or tackle Zoroastrianism or couchmaking, I suppose.
Since so many of you profess to be admirers of second-wave feminism as opposed to third-wave feminism, I thought it would be interesting to ask which second-wave feminists in particular do you appreciate? Which books written by second-wave feminists have you read and found interesting? Which second-wave feminist activists have you specifically admired as you formed the opinion that you like second-wave feminism but you have no use for third-wave feminism? I'm just curious.
It's a dumb question, Steve. It really is. I appreciate all of the things that physics has done for society. I don't need to know exactly who thought of the concept of black holes, or who invented microwave ovens or anything like that to appreciate the position that I'm in now because of physics. Just like I can appreciate the work that second wave feminists have done to bring us closer to equality between the genders, male and female. No, that's not it. To the sexes, male and female. I can appreciate that work without having to know exactly who they were or what they said, and you can apply that to anything. I mean, economic theory, or to chemistry, or to basket weaving. You know, I don't need to know exactly, you know, what types of baskets the Inuits make and out of what, in order to appreciate a basket. So that's really a dumb straw man kind of question here, Steve. I guess I really didn't expect any better of you, so.
You do understand that reading the title of a book or an article or watching the first 15 seconds of a video is not going to give you a deep, nuanced understanding of what that book or article or video is about, right? That being said, how can you expect to understand or critique feminist sources if you don't even attempt to understand what they're trying to say?
Well, Michael, see my last answer. I don't need to know. I don't need to fully understand all of the nuances and backgrounds of a bad theory in order to understand that it's a bad theory. A bad modus operandi, a bad program, if you will. When you put in the inputs and it doesn't work, okay, well, there's something wrong. Okay, how do I determine what's wrong? Well, I run the program and find out where it quits. Okay, it quits at this module, so maybe there's a problem within this module. Oh, look, there's a missing end parentheses here. Okay, let's put that in there. Oh, look, it works now. Having a basic understanding of programming, I can do that. I can troubleshoot to that extent. I don't need to be an expert in Perl or C# or something like that in order to find little problems like that. So I'm not attempting to write my own programming language, just like I'm not attempting to debunk, per se, every feminist who's ever existed and ever had a theory that was full of horseshit. When I'm presented with that material, I can look at it critically and say, there are problems with your methodologies or your thinking or your reasoning or your rationale for what you're saying, and here's why. Me personally, I'm a deconstructionist. I take things apart. I don't necessarily put things together. But I can deconstruct what's being said, the arguments that are being put forward. Should I go out and write a book saying that feminism is crap? No, there are officers who have done that now, and nobody reads them. Because it's an anti-group, if you will. And a lot of times they're people who are doing it for ideological reasons that aren't just looking at it critically, but those things are out there. Why haven't you gone and read those? To know what people are going to say when they challenge your feminist ideologies.
Why is trying and failing to debunk a study into sexual assault the #1 priority for a rational thinker now? Does it maybe say something about your priorities? Does it? Nah, it's fine, it's the feminazis, we have to stop them. They're taking away our video games. Look, Anita, I'm sorry, but I can't actually destroy video games. That doesn't make any sense.
I'm not even sure what to say here in this part, because really he's going off on a tangent here with this argument about trying and failing to debunk, this particular rape study. I believe he's talking about the 1 in 5. The 1 in 5 thing. He's directly, I'm sure, looking directly at Sorgan and Bakad, who, because Christy Winters continually accuses him of not reading, and sometimes he just does it for the lulz, I'm sure. But in the case of H Bomber guy here, he did a video on Sargon and that particular study, and no, I'm sorry, that was Garrett that did it. Garrett wasn't involved in this video. Sorry, H Bomber guy. I didn't mean to falsely associate the video with you, but Garrett's video was crap too. That doesn't mean, and this was one video talking about the 1 in 5 stat that Sargon did. That was actually pretty good. It wasn't fantastic. It wasn't perfect, but he did read it, and he did correctly state that the paper itself says you can't abstract these across all colleges. Their data collection methodology was not the best for collecting that data. Their definitions and descriptions were not necessarily entirely clear either, and at no point did they directly list in the study itself. I believe they did not exactly list the exact questions as they appeared in the survey itself. They just presented the findings. So a lot of things make that questionable enough for me to doubt the 1 in 5 statistic, particularly considering that would mean that, I mean, the actual reported numbers are much, much lower. Surveys where people voluntarily come in order to answer questions instead of being randomly selected certainly lends to some questions about the strength of the study. And not including all of their procedures and methodologies is also a bit troubling, and something that they acknowledge. So trotting out the 1 in 5 stat from one particular study, and there was some concurrence with another study that was done in a very similar way, which is when methodologies really come into question here. That says that perhaps this is not as solid of a number as we want to put out here, much like the wage gap and the 77 cents on the dollar. I'll do a video on that eventually, but it's not an accurate representation of pay in the United States. So that was the end of part 2. So yeah, that was the feminist questions. Now we're getting on to discrimination. This is probably going to be a 4-part series if I haven't mentioned that before. We're now 6 minutes into the video, and I'm 46 minutes into this presentation. I talk way too much. I need to trim this down. So we're going to stop this now and maybe record better part 2 and 3. No, it's going to be ridiculous. 20-minute videos. I guess it'll probably be all right. So like, comment, share, subscribe. Stand by for part 3 and probably part 4 of this video. And we'll take it from there. So, goodbye and hello, as always.
If it doesn't,